In the haunted history of the 20th century, few names echo with such dread as Fidel Castro. Born on August 13, 1926 in Oriente, Cuba, his life began not in poverty's chains but in the strange twilight between privilege and oppression. His father, Ángel Castro, had come from Spain decades earlier, not as a hero, but as a soldier sent to crush Cuba's fight for freedom. Spain lost, but Ángel remained, carving out wealth in sugar fields drenched with the sweat and blood of laborers. Fidel was born into this contradiction, the son of a landowner, yet surrounded by the wretched poverty of plantation workers, many of them immigrants scraping by in misery. His illegitimate birth was a mark of shame in a Catholic land, his childhood steeped in whispers of scandal. But where other children bent, Fidel hardened. He grew, not as a scholar, but as an athlete, his body forged like iron. He would never fade quietly into the ranks of men. Cuba itself was a nation bleeding out. American corporations ruled its economy, while mafia dons ran its nightlife. Politicians traded bribes like currency, and the people were left to rot in hunger and despair. By the time Fidel reached the University of Havana in 1945, the island was little more than a playground for foreigners and thieves. On campus, where gangs carried guns as easily as books, Castro's rage found its first outlet. He threw himself into protests, into speeches, into causes that rattled against the American empire that strangled the Caribbean. He joined movements to free Puerto Rico. He tangled with left-wing militants, whispered in the shadows of Havana. The police suspected him of murder. Whether true or not, the myth of Castro the firebrand had begun. He fled to join rebellions abroad, even leaping into shark-infested waters to escape capture during a failed uprising against the Dominican dictator Trujillo. For the first time, Fidel tasted armed insurrection, and he would never let it go. Back in Cuba, corruption deepened, and so did Castro's resolve. He studied the works of Marx, Lenin, and Trotsky, his mind sharpening to a revolutionary edge. When Batista, the strong man who had once fled to Florida, seized power again in 1952, this time through a military coup, Castro abandoned peaceful reform. He would answer tyranny with blood. On July 26, 1953, he led over 100 men against the Moncada barracks. It was a massacre. Half were slaughtered, the rest captured. Fidel stood in chains before the court, yet even as the state demanded silence, he roared. His speech, "History will absolve me," transformed defeat into prophecy. He was sentenced to prison, but Batista made a mistake that would haunt him forever. He released Castro after less than 2 years. Fidel went into exile, but exile only sharpened his vision. In Mexico, he met the man who would become a global symbol of rebellion and bloodshed, Ernesto Che Guevara. Together with Raúl Castro and a small band of followers, they plotted the downfall of Batista's empire. In 1956, crammed aboard the yacht Grama, over 80 men sailed back to Cuba. Ambushed upon arrival, most were slaughtered. Only 19 survived. But among those 19 was Fidel, who vanished into the shadows of the Sierra Maestra Mountains. From there, the myth began. The mountains birthed a guerrilla army. Peasants whispered his name, fighters swelled his ranks, and raids bled Batista's forces dry. By 1958, the dictator's men were deserting, disgusted by the crimes they were ordered to commit. On New Year's Eve, Batista fled into the night, stealing millions as he abandoned his island to fate. By January 1959, Fidel Castro marched triumphantly into Havana. The revolution had triumphed, but its true face was only beginning to show. At first, he masked his power behind provisional governments, but soon the disguise slipped. Within weeks, ministers resigned, exiled, or vanished. By February, Fidel was prime minister, and soon he would become something far greater and far darker. The United States, once cautious, hoped to lure him into their fold. They failed to see the truth. Castro's heart was not theirs to claim. He turned to Moscow, aligning Cuba with the Soviet Union. He nationalized American property, seized industries, and cast his lot with communism. The island became a thorn of defiance in America's side, a dagger aimed at its southern throat. In 1961, the CIA unleashed exiles in the Bay of Pigs invasion, hoping to topple him in blood and fire. Instead, it was Castro's greatest victory. He crushed the invaders, personally directing the counterattack. Over 1,000 men fell into his hands, prisoners of his revolution. The humiliation of America was complete. But what came next was darker still. In 1962, Soviet missiles began to appear on Cuban soil. Nuclear warheads pointed north, capable of turning American cities into ash within minutes. The world stood on the brink. For 13 days in October, the planet trembled. Spy planes photographed the silos. American generals demanded invasion. Kennedy hesitated. Khrushchev bargained. And Castro demanded defiance until death. The Cuban Missile Crisis ended with secret deals and tense retreats, but its shadow never lifted. Castro had survived again, a man born of scandal, raised among the poor, armed by fury and fire, had defied empires, stared into nuclear Armageddon, and refused to bow. He would rule Cuba with an iron fist for nearly half a century. To some, a liberator. To others, a tyrant. To the world, a symbol of defiance against the most powerful empire on earth. But one truth lingers like a specter. Fidel Castro was not merely a man, he was a force born of oppression and fueled by vengeance, a force that turned an island into the front line of the Cold War, and like all forces born of fire and blood, his shadow will never die. Fidel Castro, the former leader of Cuba, passed away on November 25, 2016 in Havana at the age of 90. The cause of death was not publicly disclosed, though it was widely attributed to natural causes following years of declining health. If you're a fan of chilling documentaries like this one, don't forget to like and subscribe. It lets us know you crave more darkness from the realm. Until next time, Wanderer, we'll be waiting in the shadows.